According to my mom, she works at NASA. The entire class laughed until someone with a badge entered the room and altered the atmosphere. It was a Tuesday, shortly after recess, and the classroom had a subtle scent of hand sanitizer and pencil shavings. Ms. Lawson had just finished roll call when she clapped her hands and announced, "All right, it's time for our What My Parent Does presentations." One after another, students share their stories. A father who worked as a firefighter, a mother employed a local bakery, a brother serving in the army who was acknowledged with a round of applause, even though technically he didn't count. Next came Talia Jefferson's introduction. She rose deliberately, clutching a small index card displaying her name in purple ink. Talia was known as one of the quieter students in class. She was intelligent but preferred not to raise her hand simply to speak. She surveyed the room, making no direct eye contact, and stated distinctly, "My mom works at NASA." A pause followed. Then came quiet chuckles, escalating into laughter, not a sudden outburst, but a wave that grew stronger as confused and amused glances circulated. "Wait, NASA?" Someone called from the rear. "You mean like the space agency?" Another voice whispered, perhaps a little too loudly. Even Ms. Lawson seemed surprised. She didn't laugh. Instead, her eyebrows rose a little, as if she found it difficult to accept. Talia blinked deliberately, remaining silent and still. She didn't shout. She didn't flee. She simply stood, her expression composed, her hands unwavering. "Yes," she confirmed, stating that she works at NASA and is a systems engineer. The word seemed out of place. Ms. Lawson, positioned close to the board, offered a strained smile, signaling a transition to the next item. "Well, thank you, Talia," she said, already looking over her clipboard. Next, it was Owen's turn. Talia resumed her seat, disregarding the laughter and the subtle gestures. Her fingers tightened around the bottom of her shirt. Her expression remained composed, though her cheeks felt flushed. Owen began to discuss his dad's plumbing business, but Talia registered very little of what he said. She was certain they didn't accept her story, not a single one of them, not even the teacher. They found the task unbelievable, but even more so, they doubted the individual presenting it. A girl with deep brown skin, her tight braids secured with a soft pink scrunchie. She carried a hand-me-down backpack with a broken zipper. Her shoes were well worn, and she didn't use elaborate language or speak with great volume. Therefore, when she mentioned NASA, it sounded to them like a fantasy, like a game. During Owen's presentation, a piece of paper was passed to her desk. A boy named Theo leaned towards her and asked if she cleaned the bathrooms or something. Talia remained silent. She didn't cry, not at that moment. As the bell signaled the end of class and students scrambled for their backpacks, she remained seated, her gaze fixed on the classroom door. She had never before wished her mom held a different position, one that was simpler to discuss, one that didn't invite curious glances. Nevertheless, even then, she held onto the conviction that it was important. Her mom had once shared with her that some truths are too profound for limited understanding. One simply allows them to mature. Talia exited that classroom with her head held high, despite a knot in her stomach. She felt no personal shame. Her concern was for those around her. However, she was unaware that the learning experience wasn't complete. This applied to her classmates and to Ms. Lawson as well. The Jefferson House was located close to a peaceful road in Mobile, Alabama. It wasn't ostentatious, but it was neat, painted a light yellow with green shutters. It was the sort of place where the porch light was consistently illuminated before nightfall, and the screen door made a slight creak upon entry. Talia entered through that door at a slower pace than normal. Removing her sneakers, she dropped her backpack close to the staircase and went directly to the kitchen. The aroma of garlic and onions indicated her mom had arrived home earlier than usual. Dr. Renee Jefferson was at the stove, stirring something in a large red pot. She didn't immediately acknowledge her. "You're late," she stated, not unkindly, simply observing it. Talia selected a chair and sat down. "Had to remain behind to clean the desks," she murmured. Renee turned, observed her daughter's expression, and adjusted the flame. Talia remained silent for a moment. Her hands rested in her lap, nervously playing with the sleeves of her hoodie. She appeared eager to speak, but struggled to begin. We laughed, Talia said at last. Renee understood immediately who she meant. She drew out the chair opposite her daughter and sat. There were no outbursts, no displays of shock or fear. Why? I informed them that you were employed at NASA. Renee gave a barely perceptible nod, and they didn't believe you. One kid suggested you might have cleaned the bathrooms. Renee took a shallow breath, a momentary pause to compose herself. And what was your response? You didn't offer one. Ms. Lawson quickly moved on, seemingly avoiding the issue. That action caused Renee's eyebrows to twitch almost imperceptibly, but she maintained a level tone. Do you think you said something incorrect? Talia glanced up sharply. No. Don't accept their lack of understanding as your fault. They laughed, and that's their responsibility, not yours. A moment of silence followed as the bubbling from the pot filled the space. Outside, a dog barked twice and then stopped. You know, Renee said, rising to stir the food again, when I first told people I wanted to work in aerospace, my high school guidance counselor told me to be more realistic. Said I should consider secretarial work. Talia looked up, eyes wide. That occurred in 1998. I didn't engage in an argument with her. I simply ceased visiting her office. Did it cause pain? Renee extinguished the stove and turned to her daughter. Yes, but also ignited a spark. I wasn't feeling anger towards her. I was resolved not to allow her to dictate who I could be. Talia smiled. Just a little. She appreciated that her mom consistently found a way to speak honestly, but not in a sensationalized way. There was resilience in her composure. You know, I could attend your class, Renee mentioned casually. Parent days are this Friday, correct? Talia blinked. You do that? She asked. I get the day off anyway, and it might be fun. Renee replied, but what would you wear? Talia's eyes lit up. Renee grinned. I was thinking maybe my NASA badge and that black blazer you hate. Talia responded, okay, yeah, do that. They both laughed then, a real, from-the-belly kind of laughter. The air in the kitchen felt lighter. Renee served them both bowls of stew and set them on the table. While they ate, she shared stories with Talia about her first job interview and the time she accidentally spilled coffee on a flight simulator keyboard. The stories made Talia giggle, and she no longer felt small. She felt lucky. Remember, Renee said as they finished, you don't owe anyone proof. But if the moment comes when you feel like showing them, just know I've got your back. Talia nodded slowly, cheeks full of food and her badge. Renee smirked that too. She wasn't intending to simply make a statement. She aimed to transform the atmosphere of the room. Talia hadn't realized this yet. Friday arrived sooner than Talia anticipated. Throughout the entire week, rumors continued to circulate within the classroom, much like dust in sunlight. Several students attempted apologies through hesitant gestures. One offered her a crushed fruit snack. Another quietly said, I was just joking. However, the majority behaved as if nothing had occurred. This suited Talia just fine. She hadn't forgotten. As the morning bell signaled the start of the day, the classroom was filled with excited energy. Ms. Lawson had organized the desks in a horseshoe shape, creating space for parents to be seated and present. She wore a purple blouse and had placed a tray of sugar cookies, clearly purchased from a grocery store, as a somewhat feeble attempt to create a celebratory atmosphere. Talia was positioned near the center, her backpack carefully placed beneath her chair. She felt anxious, though not frightened. It was a feeling of anticipation. She had not informed anyone that her mom would be present. The first parents arrived approximately at 9:15. This included a man wearing a mechanic's uniform, a woman in scrubs, and several moms carrying tote bags and Starbucks cups, who greeted with somewhat overenthusiastic smiles and waves. The presentation commenced, punctuated by applause and gentle laughter. One dad shared a story about repairing a sink that had unexpectedly burst. Another mom recounted her experience of teaching yoga to toddlers. Talia repeatedly looked toward the door. Precisely as Ms. Lawson began introducing the subsequent speaker, the door opened. Dr. Renee Jefferson entered the room. She was wearing the black blazer that Talia found so off-putting, perfectly tailored and crisp. Her NASA Johnson Space Center identification badge hung from a Navy lanyard, paired with black slacks and no jewelry except for a silver watch. Her expression was calm, not smug, not flashy, simply present. The room fell silent instantly. Even the air seemed to still. Ms. Lawson stammered, and Talia stood up, announcing, "This is my mom, Dr. Renee Jefferson." The teacher's eyes widened momentarily before a smile spread across their face. "All right, welcome." They gestured. "Would you like to tell us about your work?" Renee responded with a courteous nod. "Certainly. Good morning, everyone. I'm an aerospace systems engineer at NASA. I work on mission planning, flight systems integration, and operation strategy for our lunar and Mars programs." Several heads turned in the direction of Talia. A few mouths dropped open, and one student quietly whispered, "Whoa." Renee proceeded calmly. Her voice had a measured cadence, clear, smooth, and steady. "A significant portion of my work focuses on designing systems that ensure astronauts can travel safely in space. We examine all aspects, from their respiration to the transmission of data back to Earth." She paused, allowing the statement to sink in. "I'm not here to impress you," she added, observing the room. "I came here because my daughter mentioned she's spoken with you, and some of you expressed doubt about my work." Silence. Talia could hear her own heartbeat. She refused to blink. Renee approached the whiteboard and indicated a printed diagram she had prepared, a genuine schematic from a previous project. "You don't need to grasp every detail. That's perfectly acceptable," she stated, addressing the group. "But the next time you hear something that seems unbelievable, pause before dismissing it. Because innovation can emerge unexpectedly," she said, then turned to her daughter. "And when someone shares a truth with conviction, allow it to remain as it is, don't diminish it." Ms. Lawson cleared her throat. "Thank you, Dr. Jefferson. That was very enlightening." Renee smiled and walked over to sit beside Talia, who was trying not to grin. The room proceeded slowly after that. The next parent began their presentation about running a car dealership. There was no laughter, no whispering. And Talia, she sat up straighter than she ever had before. She didn't look around for affirmation. She didn't require it. At that moment, her truth resonated strongly, accessible to all present. However, many failed to recognize that the woman they had just encountered hadn't always experienced being heard. Her journey to NASA encompassed countless instances mirroring this one. Prior to becoming Dr. Renee Jefferson, she was simply Renee Lewis, a slender teenager with oversized glasses and notebooks filled with diagrams that held no interest for anyone else in her neighborhood. Growing up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, she lived in a house with a sagging front porch, raised by a mother who worked 2 jobs to pay the bills. From a young age, she preferred machines to makeup. While other girls enjoyed playing jump rope, Renee constructed small devices from discarded fans and obsolete cassette players. Her uncle once described her as odd, but she viewed that as a positive attribute. At 13, she borrowed a book from the public library about space shuttles and devoured it completely in a single night. By 14, she was independently learning fundamental programming concepts. She rarely discussed this at school. She quickly discovered that expressing a desire to work at NASA would often result in ridicule or dismissal. Her educators didn't encourage her. This wasn't due to a lack of intelligence. Renee consistently earned straight A's across all subjects. Instead, they had formed preconceived notions about her future. "You'd be exceptionally organized," one counselor remarked to her. "You'd excel as a receptionist." Upon mentioning her intention to apply to a summer program for young engineers at Georgia Tech, her math teacher expressed surprise. He remarked that it was highly competitive and questioned if she was certain about spending the application fee. Despite this, she submitted her application and was accepted. That summer proved transformative. She found herself among peers who approached problem solving in a similar manner, with notebooks brimming with questions and uninhibited curiosity. She returned with a collection of blueprints and a newfound sense of purpose. College presented its own challenges. At Auburn University, she found herself one of just 3 black women within the entire engineering department. During collaborative assignments, she frequently was asked to record notes rather than work on calculations. Instructors continued to mispronounce her name, even after 3 semesters had passed. Despite these difficulties, she remained steadfast, consistently attending classes. Renee supported herself by working evenings at a diner close to campus and providing tutoring services to high school students on weekends. There were moments when she contemplated abandoning her studies. It wasn't a matter of her inability to manage the workload. The difficulties stemmed from the draining effort of constantly having to demonstrate her place. During one spring, following a successful thermodynamics midterm, she overheard 2 classmates speaking privately behind her. One suggested she must have received assistance, and the other speculated she may have copied from another student. Instead of confronting them, she didn't shed tears. She simply returned home, opened her textbook, and began preparing for the upcoming finals. By the semester's conclusion, she achieved the top rank within her department. It was an unspoken understanding amongst them, but they recognized it. Following graduation, she completed an internship at Lockheed Martin. Subsequently, she submitted an application to NASA, which she considered a long shot. However, her qualifications were undeniable. The acceptance call arrived in March while she was in a laundromat, surrounded by wet towels and with only one dryer operational. Her mother wept on the phone for a full 5 minutes. From there, the substantial effort commenced. The meetings, the designs, the late nights, the subtle glances in conference rooms, the moments where she had to repeat herself 3 times to be heard. But she persisted in voicing her thoughts, because whenever she worked at a console or drafted a fresh concept, she recalled a younger version of herself who only needed one person to believe it was achievable. Now, as she entered her daughter's 5th grade classroom, the badge swaying from her neck, she represented more than just herself. She stood for every girl who had ever been told, "People like you don't do that." However, this wasn't about proving a point anymore. It was about establishing something new in her daughter, a foundation that couldn't be undermined. The following Monday, subtle changes were noticeable, not in a dramatic fashion, but through small shifts. The shift was subtle, something you'd only perceive if you were paying close attention. When Talia entered class, she anticipated no special welcome, and none arrived, but the atmosphere felt different. People didn't visibly react when she spoke. Theo didn't whisper. In fact, he completely avoided looking at her. During recess, 2 girls, Kennedy and Samira, approached her near the jungle gym. They stood nearby, uncomfortably, shifting their weight. "My mom said your mom's speech was really something," Kennedy said, chewing her bottom lip. "She seemed intelligent, genuinely so." "She is," Talia answered promptly. Samira concurred. "I researched NASA after school," she explained. "It's quite interesting." That was their brief exchange. Yet they remained. And for the first time all year, the 3 of them settled on the bench and discussed a topic beyond snack trades or slime videos. Later that day, Ms. Lawson spoke privately with Talia as the class prepared to leave. "I wanted to say something," she began, her voice softer than normal. Regarding last week, Talia looked up, attentive. "I should have managed that situation differently," Ms. Lawson continued. "I ought to have asked more questions, rather than proceeding so quickly. I apologize." Talia wasn't certain how to respond. She rarely encountered adults offering apologies in that manner. She nodded once, deliberately. That was sufficient for the present, though not everyone experienced a change of perspective. Certain children still spoke in hushed tones, but they did so with greater discretion. Some observed her with an expectation of failure, seemingly needing her to falter to reaffirm their own perspectives. One boy, Dean, would quietly say "NASA kid" whenever she passed, as if attempting to diminish her accomplishments. Talia remained composed. She did not react defensively or retreat. Instead, she continued her efforts. She engaged more frequently in class, volunteering answers even when uncertain of the correctness. Now, even making mistakes didn't intimidate her, not as it once had. One afternoon during group work, she overheard a classmate say, "She thinks she's better than us." Talia looked up calmly and replied, "No, I just know I belong here." No further debate followed. At home, Renee observed the change as well. Talia spoke more at dinner. sharing small details about her day without needing to be prompted repeatedly. And she began drawing again, shifting away from cartoons towards diagrams, similar to those her mother created. Rockets, helmets, star maps in pencil. One evening, Renee discovered a post-it note affixed to the fridge. It stated, "I'm going to work there too, love, Talia." She left it untouched for 3 days. However, this wasn't solely about demonstrating assurance. A more profound shift had occurred within Talia. It was no longer a matter of disproving anyone. It was about embracing her own authenticity, recognizing truth regardless of criticism. During gym class, when the teacher requested they write down a goal not related to sports, Talia wrote, "Engineer, space missions just like my mom." When the teacher announced it, there were no laughs. The class simply listened. However, at home, a different feeling arose. It was a still moment shared between mother and daughter, solidifying all they had experienced. It was Friday night again. A full week had passed since Parent Day, and the house was filled with the aroma of Renee's renowned lemon chicken. Talia sat at the kitchen table, sketching a new design, a rotating satellite with solar panels shaped like flower petals. She worked quietly, pausing occasionally to erase or examine an angle. Renee watched from the sink, carefully drying a dish. The focused way her daughter drew, with her tongue slightly pressed against her upper lip, brought back memories of herself at 12, always constructing something in her mind. "Would you like to take a break?" Renee asked softly. Talia looked up. "Almost finished." Renee smiled, resting against the counter. "You've been working on that for 2 hours." Talia replied, "I know, I just wanted to look right." She completed the final line and showed the paper to her mom. Renee approached and examined it closely. "Explain it to me." Talia said, "Well, it's a satellite, but instead of keeping all the panels flat, they open up like this." She demonstrated the shape with her hands. "So it can collect more energy when it turns, depending on the angle of the sun." Renee acknowledged with a nod, clearly impressed. "That's a clever approach. Where did that idea originate?" Talia replied, "I'm not entirely sure. I had been considering sunflowers earlier, observing how they track the sun's movement. The concept simply arose." Renee took a seat next to her, carefully placing the paper on the table. "You know what I appreciate most about that idea?" She inquired. "What?" Renee responded. "You weren't attempting to make a favorable impression. You were simply striving to resolve an issue." Talia glanced at the drawing once more. "Yes, I suppose so." They remained there for a moment in quiet contemplation. A comfortable silence settled. Then Talia spoke again, her voice gentler. "Do you think they truly believed me?" "After you left," Renee placed her hand on the table. "Some did, some still don't. That's not something you can always manage. So what is the solution? You continue to reappear. That's the challenging aspect. Not a single time, but repeatedly. You articulate the truth, even when it seems as though nobody listens." Talia considered that as you did. Renee offered a gentle smile, similar to the one I still offer. "Was it always this difficult for you?" Renee reclined in the chair, her expression thoughtful. "Sometimes more so, but I stopped expecting it to become simple." Talia regarded her mother, seeing her not only as a parent, but as an individual. Someone who had overcome obstacles she hadn't even been aware of. Someone who possessed quiet strength without needing external validation. "I used to wish you had a conventional job." Renee laughed, something straightforward to describe. Talia observed her mother's reaction, recognizing the discomfort when people inquired. "Now, I find it quite admirable, truly admirable." Renee reached out and gently tucked one of her daughter's braids behind her ear. "I'm proud of you, she said. "Not because of what you said in class, but because you said it anyway." Talia felt a warmth in her chest, not just pride, but relief. A weight she hadn't noticed until it started to lift. "I didn't think you were going to come that day," she admitted. Renee raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" she asked. "I thought maybe you'd think it wasn't worth it." Renee hesitated. Then she moved nearer, speaking with a resolute and unwavering tone. "Anything that impacts your self-perception is always deserving of support." Little needed to be said after that. Talia rose and proceeded to the refrigerator, took a magnet, and attached her artwork directly beside the grocery list. Renee observed her, feeling a sense of quiet contentment. Not every learning experience warranted recognition. Some simply existed, perceptible only to those who had rightfully gained them. There remained one final point to share, not directed at Talia, but for those still discovering what excellence resembles. The following week, during the morning announcements, Ms. Lawson took an unanticipated action. She presented a student submission from the Career Dreams bulletin board and read it aloud to the class. "This one is from Talia Jefferson," she announced. She wrote, "I want to build machines that will reach places no person has ever reached because someone must discover how to get us there, and I believe I can." There was no laughter this time, only silence. Several students turned to observe her, not with incredulity, but with something approaching respect. Talia sat at her desk, serene and concentrated, sketching miniature gears in the borders of her notebook. She didn't require a glance upward, nor did she need the room to applaud. That wasn't the focus, as this narrative was never centered on recognition. It concerned honesty, about maintaining conviction when others expressed doubt, about the significance of speaking clearly, not noisily. However, the individuals in that classroom had observed something unexpected. A woman with qualifications, certainly. Beyond that, she was a woman with a clear sense of self, someone who didn't require authorization to express herself, and a daughter who witnessed her interspaces devoid of faith and yet infused them with strength. Renee didn't need to speak loudly. She didn't need to detail her achievements. Her presence was sufficient. However, it was Talia who bore the burden of that day. She endured the flames of mockery, remained within them, and emerged stronger. It can be challenging to express self-belief, particularly when facing a lack of external validation. The core message extends beyond the nature of a parent's profession or the perceived grandeur of their role. It centers on the lessons we impart to our children, not through spoken words, but through demonstrable actions. Affirming your child instills resilience. Consistently supporting them cultivates bravery. Even a brief moment in a crowded room, standing near them, demonstrates what it truly means to be heard. When a child experiences being seen, not only by a teacher or a classmate, but by the wider world, they cease to diminish their presence. They stop doubting themselves. They begin to carry themselves with the confidence of someone who has something significant to contribute. Because they do. Talia no longer needed to persuade anyone. She wasn't waiting for the class to accept her. She had already moved forward, now concentrating on what she thought achievable. This is what makes narratives like hers significant. Because for each child who has been ridiculed, overlooked, or interrupted, there's another opportunity awaiting. A moment when the door opens, when the badge is displayed, when silence transforms into respect, and it remains with them. At the conclusion of the school year, when the class created their memory book, a page was designated most likely to. Beneath Talia's photograph, a message read, seemingly with the intention of sending something into space. She reacted with a smile, not due to the coolness of the statement, but because this time it appeared to be genuine. Therefore, the next time a child expresses a significant aspiration, refrain from immediate skepticism. Avoid limiting their potential to your current understanding. Allow them to surpass your expectations. And for parents observing this, be present, even when it feels challenging, particularly when it's truly important. Vocalize your belief in them. For more stories like this, please subscribe. These are stories that highlight true strength. A man struck a 53-year-old woman on public transit, mistakenly believing she was alone and vulnerable. He was unaware that her husband held the position of the most respected officer in town. It had been a challenging day, characterized by delays and setbacks. When Vanessa Kirkland arrived at the Blue Line platform in downtown Sacramento, her heels were causing discomfort, her back ached, and she was 2 missed calls behind schedule on her way to the train. The time was approaching 6:15 p.m. The sun had already begun to descend behind the old courthouse building. She looked at her phone, but did not check the notifications. Not tonight. Vanessa was 53, possessing a sharp mind, a warm voice, and consistently wearing her silver-framed glasses and demonstrating patience. She worked as a lead advocate at a nonprofit legal center experiencing long days, emotionally draining environments, and paperwork that was constant. Nevertheless, she wouldn't trade it. Assisting individuals, particularly families navigating a system they found perplexing or untrustworthy, felt like a duty, not merely a profession. As the train arrived, she boarded and looked for a place to sit. Limited space was available. She located a partially filled row towards the center and settled in with a soft exhale, placing her tote bag next to her. The atmosphere was largely peaceful. Passengers were absorbed in their phones, listening to music or browsing on screens. A teenager in a school hoodie, chewing gum and watching something with the volume a little too high, sat directly across from her. 2 seats to her left, a couple of nurses still in scrubs spoke softly in Spanish. It was nothing out of the ordinary. The train began to move. Vanessa rested her head and breathed out. She considered dinner, likely just leftovers. Perhaps she would reheat that lentil stew, or possibly just cereal and a long bath. Her thoughts wandered. But then a voice arose. It was loud, rapid, and smug. "Excuse me, I'm going to ask you something." She didn't move at first, just opened her eyes slowly. Across the aisle, a man had gotten on at the last stop. Mid-20s, tall, wiry, and loud, wore a sleeveless hoodie and had headphones around his neck. He was looking straight at her, grinning. Vanessa blinked once, didn't say a word. He leaned a little closer. "I'm serious. You're sitting up here as if you're running for mayor." Wearing a complete church ensemble, I observed her. A nearby teenager chuckled softly. The man visibly straightened, seeming to relish the attention. "You must be going somewhere important, ma'am," he stated. She remained silent. Adjusting her glasses, she maintained a dignified posture and subtly turned her head toward the window. However, he wasn't finished. He began pacing with deliberate, measured steps down the aisle, gesturing at various passengers. "People like her," he declared, "always act as if they are superior. Sit straight, avert your gaze, and remain silent." It seemed as though others judged us harshly. People began to notice. A woman near the front briefly looked back before quickly averting her gaze. A young man behind Vanessa subtly reached for his phone. Vanessa felt no surge of panic. Years of practice had taught her to remain composed during confrontations. She recognized this behavior, a display of confidence fueled by the desire for attention. A man who felt more powerful when others appeared diminished. She spoke calmly. "You should take a seat." Her voice was even, neither raised nor trembling, simply resolute. The man paused. He paused, appearing hesitant. Then, he tilted his head. "Oh, are you giving orders now? Do you have a badge or something?" Vanessa remained unmoved. "No, but you're embarrassing yourself in front of a train full of strangers." His smile briefly wavered. Then he moved closer, too close. However, the atmosphere in the car shifted. People were observing now, more than previously. There was tension, certainly, but also a sense of anticipation, as if everyone was awaiting the next development. Vanessa remained still, her gaze fixed on him, her hands resting in her lap. He smirked. "You got a mouth on you. Let's see if you talk like that when I'm a little closer." But he didn't know who he was addressing, and he was about to discover that the hard way. The train rattled forward, cutting through the city as if oblivious to the escalating tension inside Car 7. The man, later identified as Kyle Dunham, aged 26, with a record full of petty nonsense, stood inches from Vanessa now. A subtle aroma of malt liquor and mint gum emanated from his breath. He lowered himself, observing her with the gaze of a child studying a motionless doll, anticipating her to break eye contact first. She remained steadfast. "You're one of those strong, independent types, huh?" He expectorated. "Always got something smart to say when there's people around to protect you. But you on your own now, sweetheart." Vanessa released a barely perceptible sigh, the kind intended to convey disappointment, not weariness. "I'm not on my own," she stated. Kyle surveyed the surroundings with a flourish. "Oh, who has you back, then?" he called out, raising his voice. "Does anyone among you want to come and save Grandma over here?" He paused. "No, I didn't expect so." The word grandma stung more than he anticipated, not because of her age, but because of the implication behind it. It suggested she was diminished, that women aged and became invisible, useless, laughable, something to ridicule, not to honor. Nevertheless, she remained composed. "You're embarrassing yourself," she stated gently. "That's what bullies do when they are afraid." Kyle appeared startled, freezing in place. "How do you know my name?" he demanded. Vanessa subtly shifted forward, her voice remaining composed. "You mentioned it earlier, on the phone, prior to boarding the train. That was a deception." He denied having done so, but her statement unnerved him, prompting him to question what else she might know. "You're crazy," he mumbled. Vanessa turned back toward the window, not in a dismissive manner, but as if he were insignificant. This was the catalyst. Kyle's pride couldn't withstand the rejection. The audience had fallen silent. His performance was unsuccessful, and a bitter expression tightened his features. "Finish speaking now?" he demanded. "All that talking, and now you're afraid?" Vanessa remained silent, so he gently nudged her shoulder, a clear indication that this was no longer a verbal exchange. A sharp intake of breath came from the rear of the vehicle immediately. Vanessa raised her gaze slowly, maintaining her composure and silence. "Kyle," she stated, "this is your final opportunity to take a seat and depart with some measure of self-respect." Kyle's thoughts had vanished. He was consumed by anger. Humiliated, vulnerable, and needing to regain command, he struck her. The sound was distinct, a smack of skin against skin. Her glasses moved slightly. Her head tilted a little due to the impact. Exclamations arose, escalating into a commotion. People stood up. Phones appeared. A voice called out from the rear. Vanessa simply blinked, then remained still. She carefully straightened her glasses, neatly arranged a strand of hair behind her ear, then fixed her gaze directly upon him. "You have just committed a significant error." Kyle hesitated briefly, his hands still raised, his breathing now shallow. "Who do you think you are?" he asked, his voice softer. She inclined her head. "You'll find out soon enough." Two rose back. The young man who had been quietly recording rose and walked to the rear of the car. He had observed something in her eyes, something unyielding, not fearful. It prompted his movement. A voice murmured, "She's important. I believe she's someone." Another voice followed. "Is that the chief's wife?" "That's the police chief's wife." And now Kyle was hearing the murmur. "What?" he said. No one answered, but the mood in the car shifted. It had gone from outrage to recognition. This wasn't just a woman on a train anymore. This was somebody. Vanessa stayed still. Her cheek stung. Her hand trembled just a little in her lap, but she didn't let it show. Instead, she reached for her phone, opened a text, typed 5 words, "Call me when you can." Sent. She glanced upward, not toward Kyle, but at the doors. The train was one stop from Curtis Park Station, and that was the extent of his remaining time. Curtis Park Station was less than 2 minutes away now, but for all those inside the train car, time began to lengthen. No one was speaking anymore. Not genuinely. There were hushed tones, murmurs, yes. But the atmosphere had changed, becoming concentrated and oppressive. Kyle sensed it. He disliked it. He positioned himself in the middle of the aisle, as if he had something yet to demonstrate. His gaze now moved frequently, scanning the passengers who avoided eye contact. He observed those recording, resenting their lack of laughter. They weren't fearful of him, either. Not anymore. "Man, you're tripping," he mumbled. She started it, trying to appear superior. No one reacted. Across from him, Vanessa had repositioned her tote onto her lap. Her fingers were clenched around the straps, her thumb rhythmically stroking a small stitched detail. She felt no fear. However, anger simmered within her. A quiet anger, an anger that held back, an anger that was justified. Her skin still felt hot. The mark of his hand remained visible. She refrained from touching it. Maintaining a composed stance, she kept her shoulders straight. She was aware of the scrutiny, not only from those with phones, but also from the observant individuals who had witnessed similar incidents and felt powerless. Now, their attention was on her, and so was Kyle's. "You think you're better than me," he hissed suddenly. "That's what this is. You people always act like you're too good. Vanessa finally looked at him. Her voice was low. I don't think I'm better than you. I think you're making choices you're going to regret. You threatening me? He shot back. No, she said. I'm warning you. There's a difference. The train gave a mechanical groan as it began slowing into Curtis Park. The lights flickered once overhead. Kyle turned toward the door, fidgeting. A woman 2 seats down whispered something to her boyfriend. He nodded subtly, moved his hand into his jacket pocket, a badge, an off-duty officer merely awaiting the signal. And then Kyle turned back one last time. You ain't nothing but a loudmouth in a skirt, he spat. Nobody gonna save you. And with that, he reared his hand back again. But this time someone moved. Not Vanessa, not the off-duty cop. A man, tall, with a beard and still wearing a dusty construction vest from work, moved quickly from the rear of the car. He seized Kyle's wrist as he started to swing and pulled it down forcefully. Try that again, and I'll break your arm, the man stated, his voice calm but menacing. Kyle attempted to free himself, but was unable to. The man's grip was stronger and more resolute. Finished? He inquired. Kyle swore, recoiled, and stumbled toward the opposite wall of the train. He appeared like a trapped creature, snarling more from panic than from any sense of dignity. Vanessa rose. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't theatrical. Just even. She surveyed the car, noting the woman with her phone, the young man in the hoodie, the child in the back feigning disinterest. Then she looked at Kyle. I won't file charges for what you just did, she stated, her voice clear enough for everyone to hear. But someone will. Someone invariably does. And when they do, I hope it's recorded. The train emitted a hiss as the doors opened. Curtis Park Station. Light flooded in from the platform. There, on the platform, accompanied by 2 plainclothes officers, stood Darius Kirkland. He wasn't wearing a uniform. It wasn't necessary. He wore a black button-down shirt and slacks, and his expression was stern and intense. He boarded the train. Silence filled the space. Kyle stared at him, puzzled. Who? Darius spoke, his tone direct. Kyle remained still. Darius advanced 1 step. Now, a badge appeared, revealed with quiet assurance. The name was visible. Kirkland. Kyle's gaze shifted to Vanessa. An understanding dawned. That name, her. Oh no, he breathed. The off-duty officer behind him placed a hand on his shoulder. Let's go. I didn't know. Kyle shouted. Yo, I didn't know who she was. Darius said nothing. Vanessa stepped off the train first. She didn't look back. But the man who slapped her would never forget the moment he realized who she was, nor how close he came to losing a lot more than his pride. They walked Kyle off the platform like a child being removed from class for misbehaving. This wasn't a school setting, and no message would be sent home. The train departed behind them. Vanessa maintained a steady, even pace as she walked. Darius walked beside her, mostly silent. He didn't need to speak. His jaw was tense, not with anger, but with controlled composure. Years of policing had shown him the value of knowing when to speak and when silence was more impactful. Behind them, Kyle was guided to a bench close to the platform stairs. He was breathing rapidly, his eyes wide, still processing what had occurred. A plainclothes officer stood close by, observing with little visible emotion. Vanessa reduced her speed and then spoke softly, her voice almost a whisper. I'm okay. Darius looked at her, his eyes showing a trace of gentleness for the first time since boarding the train. I know you are, he replied, but I'm not. He hesitated. I saw the entire video before I arrived. The initial message I received was from Naomi Simmons. Do you recall her? From Housing Court? Vanessa gave a single nod. She witnessed the event as it unfolded, communicating it to me in just 4 words. Is this your wife? Vanessa released a sigh that mingled amusement and weary comfort. You should have observed the child in the 3rd row, she remarked. He attempted to disappear the instant that boy began to be noisy, resembling Darren when he would feign sleep to evade tasks. Darius laughed softly. I long for that boy, she acknowledged, her eyes wandering across the platform. Many people on that train likely recognized this scenario. However, this time the events unfolded differently. He touched her shoulder gently. It's because you didn't react, she said. That alters everything. A few yards behind them, Kyle began to fall apart. Not from guilt, not yet, but from fear. The fog lifted, and the man he slapped was standing nearby, shaking hands with law enforcement, while his own hands were held beneath his thighs like a child avoiding reprimand. An officer spoke to him, and his reply was abrupt and overly loud. Darius overheard. I didn't even hit her that hard. He glanced at Vanessa, his expression remaining composed. Do you mind if I handle this? She gave an affirmative nod. I trust you. Darius then proceeded back toward Kyle, his steps deliberate and controlled, as if approaching a speaker's platform rather than a bench. Kyle sat up straighter as he noticed Darius's approach. Yo, look, I didn't know who she was, man. I didn't know she was, like, married to a cop. I believe she was simply just what? Darius interrupted. Tell me. Kyle's mouth opened, but he didn't speak. Darius sat beside him, maintaining a comfortable distance. You thought she was merely a woman. Alone. An easy target. Kyle's lips tightened, seeking an explanation. She was speaking her mind. No, Darius responded, his voice calm. She was demonstrating composure. That's not a common sight, is it? I didn't harm her in that way, though. You made contact with her. You placed your hands on her. Before an audience. Recorded on camera. And then there was another attempt. Kyle scanned the area, as if searching for support. But the platform was empty. There was no one to assist him. No one ever did for people like Vanessa. That was intentional, Darius stated. You're fortunate because she's extending understanding that others wouldn't. But don't misinterpret that as a sign of vulnerability. Kyle lowered his gaze. His earlier arrogance diminished to a smaller form. The inflated self-assurance had vanished. He appeared more like a boy now, lost, tired, and suddenly very aware of how much worse things could have been. What's going to happen to me? He asked. That depends, Darius said. Right now, you're being detained. There's an outstanding warrant on you for a missed court date from 3 months ago. Kyle's mouth dropped open. Unrelated, but not forgotten. Darius stood up. And later? That depends on what kind of man you decide to be when you walk out of holding. He turned, not waiting for a reply, and returned to Vanessa, who was now seated close to a column, eyes closed in a brief moment of quiet. However, the complete story wasn't finished, and its full impact hadn't completely arrived. At least, not yet. They didn't depart the station immediately. Vanessa had taken a place on the lengthy metal bench beside the wall, sheltered by the weathered Curtis Park sign. She sat straight, legs crossed at the ankle, and her hands were finally relaxed. A stillness had returned, the type often present after a disturbance. Darius stood a short distance away, holding a phone to his ear and speaking softly. Vanessa couldn't discern his words, but she understood his demeanor. It was the voice he employed when rectifying another's blunder. Following a few minutes, he ended the call, approached her, and sat next to her. They're taking him to county, he stated. He isn't facing charges yet for the slap. Not unless you request it. Vanessa remained silent for a moment. She wasn't trying to be elusive. She simply needed a short time to consider what was most important. I won't push, she stated following a brief silence. Let the warrant take care of it. That's sufficient for now, Darius agreed slowly, nervously biting his lower lip. He acknowledged her fortunate position. They remained seated next to each other. People passed them on the platform, some offering curious looks, some murmuring as they recognized her from the videos already in circulation. Vanessa had experienced widespread online attention previously. However, nothing like this. Typically, the shared content consisted of excerpts from her addresses at city forums or housing events. Previously, a video of her embracing a woman who had recently won a child custody case had garnered thousands of likes. However, this situation was different. Now, she was the woman on the train, and her face, still faintly marked where Kyle's hand had landed, was circulating across timelines and news feeds in real time. She anticipated the consequences, comment sections, opinions, outrage, and debate. Some might describe her as a hero. Others might perceive her as lenient for not responding in kind. Still others would likely seek to place blame. Darius broke the silence. Remember that speech I gave last week? He began. About dignity, public space, and consequence? She replied, Yes, I was in the front row. He continued, I said every citizen deserves to move through their city without fear. That is the baseline, not the luxury. She nodded. He went on, when I said that, I was thinking about everyone. Children walking to school, grandparents catching the bus, teachers, nurses, grocery clerks. I hadn't been thinking about you, she acknowledged. I know, she said gently, and I regret that I hadn't. Vanessa turned to him. Please don't do that. He lowered his gaze. You shouldn't have been in that situation. She offered a brief laugh. Do you believe I haven't faced worse? His eyes rose. I've lived 53 years in this skin, Darius. On this earth, in this body. I've been followed, yelled at, disrespected, dismissed, and talked over. It simply so happened they were recorded. He showed no smile. Yet, he seemed to grasp the sentiment. You've always been stronger than I remarked. No, she replied. I'm simply more experienced. A train whistle echoed as a train arrived at the station. A different vehicle, different travelers, the same city. A young woman in scrubs drew near carefully, her gaze shifting between them. Excuse me, Mrs. Kirkland? She inquired. Vanessa turned. Yes, I just wanted to express my gratitude, she said, for the way you manage him, for maintaining your dignity. Vanessa rose, offered her hand. What's your name? Rosa replied, I'm a nurse at St. Joseph's. You had a long shift? Vanessa nodded. You take care of people all day. Thank you. Rosa appeared taken aback by the courtesy. She offered a small nod and departed. Darius rose to stand next to his wife. Let's go home. But Vanessa didn't move immediately. She glanced around the platform one last time, observing the train tracks, the benches, the signage, and the flow of people as if nothing had occurred. It felt as if time had restarted. I'll ride the train tomorrow, she stated. Are you certain? Yes. And the following day. And the day after that. I refuse to be silenced simply because someone is unfamiliar with me, Darius said, placing a gentle hand on her back. However, as they departed the station, neither of them realized the extent to which this moment would affect those beyond the train car. This became clear when the news broke. By the time they arrived at their home in Southland Park, Vanessa's phone had received more than 20 notifications. Darius had received a significant influx of communication. Friends, journalists, colleagues, and individuals they hadn't spoken to in years suddenly recalled their contact information. She chose not to respond to most of these inquiries. The incident had already been reported in the local news by 9 p.m. One news source titled their report community leader assaulted on light rail, suspect apprehended at station. Another opted for a more dramatic headline. Slap on the train sparks debate over civility and race. However, the video clips were the content that spread most rapidly. A 16-second vertical video, filmed by someone sitting 3 rows back, captured Kyle's words. This is Arte Lance. It showed the slap and the subsequent moment where she met his gaze, appearing unaffected by his action. Within hours, the video surpassed 100,000 views, then 200, and finally 500,000. Each comment offered an opinion. Some praised her composure. Others questioned why no one intervened earlier. And predictably, some found fault. Daria was sitting on the bed's edge, looking at news articles, her jaw tight. Vanessa entered from the bathroom, her face freshly washed and her hair wrapped. You should put that away, Vanessa said. Daria looked up. I keep reading these comments. People analyzing what you should have said. What you didn't say. It's as if you were putting on a show. That's the internet. Daria replied. I simply dislike seeing you transformed into a symbol. Vanessa lifted an eyebrow. That has been occurring since I was 13 years old. The first instance I experienced being followed in a drugstore simply for wearing lip gloss marked a turning point. Daria sighed. I know. I only wanted you to find some quiet. I have quiet, she replied. And I still do. That boy didn't deprive me of anything. In fact, he provided a space for me to express what I've always felt. He looked at her, pausing. That regardless of your identity, respect isn't gained through increased volume or physical force. It's demonstrated by how you regard those who are not indebted to you. She positioned herself beside him, carefully taking the phone from his grasp and placing it on the nightstand. You recall what you told the academy class last spring? She inquired. Which part? He responded, We don't train for revenge. We train for response. Darius chuckled softly. I borrowed that line from my grandfather. Well, you gave it meaning, she replied. It's the same reason I refrained from reacting with force today. You address situations as they arise, not according to others' expectations, but as they require. A pause. Did you see how many people were watching? She continued. If I had lost control, it wouldn't have been about him anymore. It would have become a completely different situation. Darius nodded slowly. You are correct. At that moment, a new message appeared on Vanessa's phone. This one was not from the press. It was from a mother of a high school student she'd represented 6 months earlier in a school discrimination case. She had defended him after he'd been suspended for what proved to be a false accusation by a teacher. The message stated, My son saw the video and said, That's Miss Kirkland. She's real. I just want you to know how much you matter to people like us. Thank you for being who you are. Vanessa looked at the message for a long moment. Then she gave the phone to Darius silently. He read it, exhaled, and for the first time that night, he allowed himself to smile. You matter, he said. So do you, she replied. The following morning, while they were seated together on the porch enjoying coffee, a news van leisurely drove down the street. The vehicle didn't halt, but the camera within directed its view towards the house before proceeding onward. I suspect today will be more eventful than anticipated, he remarked. I believe every day is, Vanessa replied. She rose, stretched, and retrieved her tote bag near the door. Are you going out? He asked. Yes. They require my presence at the center. We have eviction hearings scheduled for this week. I will not be absent due to someone being unable to accept a woman speaking directly. Darius also rose. Desire a lift? She offered a smile. No, I will travel by train. She observed her intently for a moment. Are you certain? I want to be visible. Identical seat, identical time. Because I'm not the one who requires anonymity. However, as Vanessa resumed her schedule, the events that transpired on that train continued to resonate far beyond the station, impacting dinner conversations, classrooms, news organizations, and homes throughout the nation. Following those initial moments, video recordings of Vanessa Kirkland were shared across newsrooms, courtrooms, break rooms, and barbershops. The incident generated discussion in locations that seldom addressed individuals like her, middle-aged, black, composed during pressure, unaffected by disorder. Podcasts featured it. Community forums offered perspectives. National broadcasters attempted to contextualize it, as though it conformed to a predetermined narrative concerning race, gender, and power. However, the situation defied easy categorization. That was its compelling quality. Despite everything, Vanessa consistently took the same train, often securing the same seat when available. Whenever someone recognized her, they would offer a nod or a quiet expression of gratitude. On one occasion, an elderly gentleman approached her to simply state, I witnessed what occurred. I'm showing my granddaughter. I told her, this is how one maintains composure during a crisis. Vanessa, however, wasn't seeking acknowledgement. That's what made her actions so meaningful. She had navigated hardships previously. The difference was that the world hadn't been documenting it. The city organized a public forum 2 weeks later. Community safety, transportation, and law enforcement relations were the focus of the meeting. The hall was full. Darius was invited to speak. Attendees anticipated a discussion about crime statistics and updated patrol approaches. However, he chose to recount the story of the train. I wasn't present at the beginning, he stated from the podium. I wasn't seated beside her. I didn't observe the expression in his gaze or the stillness with which she remained while others spoke. But I was present when it concluded, and what I witnessed extended beyond my wife. He embodied restraint, strength, and a level of control that most of us only discuss in theory. He paused, looking out at the crowd. Her actions transcended mere self-preservation. She demonstrated that standing your ground doesn't always require physical force. Sometimes it involves maintaining composure when someone is attempting to undermine you. Vanessa remained silent that evening. She was seated in the second row, wearing a navy blazer and black slacks, her hands resting in her lap. Observing, hearing, understanding. Afterward, As they headed back to the vehicle, a young reporter stepped forward. He appeared apprehensive, holding a microphone in one hand and a phone in the other. "Mrs. Kirkland," he began, "do you believe you represent something, given what transpired?" She regarded him. "I am not a symbol," she replied. "I am a woman. I was weary. I was on the train, returning home, and someone believed that entitled them to behave as though I lacked significance, but the manner in which it was addressed. Many are describing it as impactful." She remained composed. "What's impactful," she stated, "is learning how to maintain your composure in a world that persistently attempts to disrupt it." He began to pose another inquiry, but she raised her hand subtly. "That is all," she responded. "Have a good evening." She and Darius departed into the night, and the story, though no longer dominating news coverage, persisted. It resonated in discussions among friends, in classrooms, when instructors utilized it as a practical example. Reflecting on the events, many recalled the emotions they felt witnessing it, prompting introspection about their own responses, their own stillness, and their own sense of self-respect. Kyle Dunham appeared in court 3 days following his arrest. The court referenced his previous charges and imposed a 30-day detention while awaiting further investigation. Vanessa did not attend the court proceedings, stating that she had already expressed what she needed to. The legal center where she worked experienced an increase in support following the incident. Financial support arrived, and individuals registered to volunteer. A few referenced the video, but the majority expressed a desire to contribute to something impactful without needing fanfare. Vanessa Kirkland, in particular, continued her daily train journeys. That train, for better or worse, evolved into a visible representation of dignity in action. In a world often filled with distractions, individuals such as Vanessa Kirkland serve as a reminder of a truth that is often overlooked. True resilience isn't always loud. Occasionally, it remains still, speaks with composure, and stands firm. This isn't driven by a desire to triumph, but a determination to remain present. If this narrative resonated with you, prompted reflection, or evoked thoughts of someone familiar, please share it. Subscribe for further authentic stories similar to this one, highlighting how quiet strength can be more impactful than force and justice can manifest in unexpected ways. Remember, you never know who you might encounter on the train. After a Black woman CEO experienced denial of service at her bank, she maintained composure. Within 5 minutes, the manager responsible for the incident was terminated. The errand was intended to be brief, approximately 10 to 15 minutes, a task easily managed between scheduled meetings. That morning, Nadira Langston, aged 48, the head of a multi-million-dollar tech firm located in Phoenix, Arizona, exited her driver's black Lincoln and entered Sycamore First Bank, carrying her company's banking portfolio carefully. She was unhurried. There was no need for haste. Her schedule had been completely free to allow her to complete the transfer of a substantial business account, which was one of several her company had been relocating for months. The account manager she typically collaborated with had retired, and today she was meeting the new team in person to finalize the documents. A simple, standard procedure. Her navy blue suit was expertly tailored. Her hair was styled in a neat, low bun, and she wore diamond studs in her ears. Understated, yet refined. Her heels made no clicking sound as she moved. They barely rustled. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had held a position of authority for a significant period and no longer felt the need to demonstrate it. Approaching the reception desk, she provided her name, Nadira Langston. She explained she was there to meet with someone from the commercial accounts department. The young woman at the counter glanced up, briefly nodding while entering information into the system. "Okay, just a moment." It was then that things began. A woman, appearing to be in her mid-50s, with pale blonde hair and a rigid posture, emerged from a nearby glass office and walked over, offering a smile that seemed strained. "Can I help you with something?" she inquired. Her voice was concise. Nadira turned and offered her hand. "Yes, thank you. I'm Nadira Langston. I understand I'm scheduled to meet with someone from the business team. I'm completing a transfer." The woman didn't return the handshake. She looked at the folder Nadira held. And you are representing which company? I'm the CEO of Bluestone Dynamics. The account was previously managed by Peter Larson before his retirement. The manager raised an eyebrow, her skepticism evident. And you're here, unaccompanied? Yes, Nadira responded calmly. It's a private matter. A pause followed. One of those pauses that conveys more than a complete sentence. The kind where judgment is disguised as confusion. Right? The woman said, adjusting her position. We generally don't permit walk-ins for high-tier accounts unless it has been arranged beforehand. Nadira stated, still calm. She retrieved the confirmation email. Here's the appointment confirmation from your internal scheduler. Today, 9:30 a.m. The woman looked at the document, then back at Nadira. Are you certain this wasn't intended for another employee at your organization? Nadira blinked, deliberately and slowly. I operate the company. A brief silence followed. My name is Cheryl Bainbridge. I'm the branch manager. We're dealing with some concerning events lately. Individuals have been falsely presenting their credentials to gain access to valuable accounts. You appreciate the seriousness of this, I'm sure. Nadira fully grasped the situation. Cheryl, is it? She replied, her tone remaining calm and measured. Offering my license, corporate ID, and the transaction papers I'm here to approve? Cheryl's smile became strained. It's simply procedure, Ms. Langston. Please don't view it as directed at you. Nadira had encountered that phrase on countless occasions, in numerous boardrooms, airport lounges, and hotel lobbies. However, before she could add anything, Cheryl motioned to the receptionist. Could you please contact security? Just to err on the side of caution. It was necessary to confirm her statements. Nadira's mouth remained still. Her tone remained consistent. Are you summoning security? She asked. On the CEO of one of our most important prospective clients? Cheryl's shoulders became even more rigid. I didn't suggest that, I replied. I simply stated we needed to verify. At that moment, a subtle change occurred within the room. A quiet hum arose from a man seated in the waiting area. A brief look passed between two tellers positioned behind the counter. A palpable shift occurred. It was evident Nadira had followed every procedure correctly, yet she was still being made to feel like an outsider. Nadira, however, was not prepared to accept the situation. Not this time. The bank lobby wasn't crowded, but sufficient people were present to observe the unfolding events. An older man, waiting in line, moved uncomfortably. A woman seated close to the loan office took out her phone, feigning a check of her email, but her gaze remained fixed on Nadira and Cheryl. The security guard was not yet present, but Cheryl remained steadfast, as if anticipating immediate reinforcement. Nadira carefully opened her folder. It contained all necessary documentation to confirm her identity. Business cards, certified articles of incorporation, 2 forms of identification, and the bank's own records confirming the account transfer. She arranged them on the reception desk methodically, similar to a card dealer. Composed. Accurate. Here, she stated, that is my Arizona state ID. This document confirms my company's EIN. It includes the board resolution authorizing me as the account signer. In this, she indicated the final sheet, is your bank's welcome letter. Cheryl briefly reviewed the papers. Anyone can print documents, she stated, crossing her arms. I've worked in banking for 27 years. I've seen people pretend to be CFOs, consultants, even heirs to estates. We don't make exceptions just because someone claims they're important. Nadira's tone remained steady, but her eyes narrowed. So this isn't about the paperwork. It's about how I appear, correct? Cheryl let out a dismissive sound. I beg your pardon. You heard me. If I presented myself as a 55-year-old man in a Brooks Brothers suit, you'd be extending a handshake and offering coffee. Ma'am, please reduce your voice volume. Nadira responded. My voice is already subdued, her words sharp and clear. I am the CEO. You have reviewed the documents. You know my name. The only thing that seemed to register was that I wasn't what they anticipated. A silence followed. A protracted, uncomfortable silence, and then Cheryl spoke. It wasn't a shout, but it carried. You just don't look like a CEO? The statement lingered, heavy as smoke after a match. Someone inhaled sharply. Another person murmured, "Did she really just say that?" The receptionist stood motionless behind the desk. She appeared to wish she could simply vanish. Nadira's eyelids lowered deliberately, yet her voice remained steady. "I have secured more than $80 million in venture capital. I have spearheaded 3 product launches. I have presented as a keynote speaker at CES and finalized agreements in 6 countries. I don't need to appear any particular way to be completely myself." Cheryl began to respond. However, before she could, Nadira shifted slightly and asked the receptionist, "Is there a regional director assigned to this branch?" The young woman nodded hesitantly. "He is present today, in fact. It's a surprise audit. He's in the back conference room." Nadira's lips formed a slight smile. "Excellent. I wish to speak with him." Then, Cheryl intervened once more, visibly agitated. "There's no necessity for that. I am capable of managing this. Let's avoid making the situation worse." Nadira faced her directly. "You have already worsened this. You summoned security. You rejected every form of identification I presented. You challenged my position, my firm, and my credibility, all without initiating a single phone call to confirm any detail. Therefore, no, you're not capable of handling this." The room fell silent. The receptionist lifted the phone and initiated a call to an internal extension. "Mr. Dorsey?" she inquired. "There is someone present requesting to speak with you. Her name is Nadira Langston from Bluestone Dynamics." A brief hesitation. "Yes. All right. I will inform him." She ended the call and turned to Nadira, her eyes displaying surprise. "He is on his way out now." Meanwhile, Cheryl remained unaware of the significant misjudgment she had made. The door situated at the rear of the bank swung open, and a tall man, dressed in a charcoal suit, emerged. He moved with a brisk, purposeful stride, alert but not hurried. He held a slim leather tablet and wore an expression suggesting displeasure at being interrupted from meetings. However, his expression softened immediately when he saw Nadira. "Nadira Langston," he said, extending his hand. She shook it firmly. "Yes, you must be Mr. Dorsey." He continued, "Matthew Dorsey, Regional Director. I've heard a lot about you." Peter spoke very highly before he retired. "We appreciate the opportunity to manage your accounts." Cheryl's mouth parted slightly, and her face paled. Matthew turned to her, appearing puzzled. Did something go wrong with the meeting? Cheryl struggled to find the right words. "Yes, there was. I simply verified the credentials before providing access to the commercial suite. This follows our standard procedure." Nadira remained silent. She didn't need to. The receptionist, still positioned behind the counter, added cautiously. "She contacted security, sir. She stated that we were unable to verify the client's identity." Matthew blinked. "You contacted security? Regarding Ms. Langston?" "I was attempting to adhere to established procedures," Cheryl responded promptly. "We've experienced individuals recently presenting fabricated business credentials. I prefer not to assume any risks. You understand how crucial our commercial accounts are." He gave her a direct look. "Yes, I am aware. This is why we verify credentials, rather than form assessments of clients based on subjective impressions." Cheryl's shoulders tightened. "Excuse me?" she began. "I've reviewed the compliance logs. You didn't even access the file she presented. You disregarded the scheduled appointment. You dismissed the identification. I was safeguarding the bank," she asserted. "You embarrassed the bank," Matthew retorted. "You've publicly humiliated one of the most significant clients we've on board this year. In view of customers. In view of staff. With no justification." A security guard finally arrived at the front entrance, his radio clipped to his belt, meticulously scanning the room, as if anticipating trouble. Matthew dismissed him with a wave. "Everything's fine here, Eric," Cheryl repeated, her voice now trembling. False alarm. She had entered alone. Her name wasn't on the standard schedule. It was on the revised internal schedule, the one your assistant oversees. The same schedule you approve every Monday morning. "You simply didn't review it," Nadira stated, stepping forward slightly, her voice low but clear. "You hadn't acted without delay because of an absence. You paused because I didn't align with your preconceived notion of who should possess such authority." Matthew remained silent, allowing the quiet to linger. There was nothing further to elaborate on. Cheryl's mouth opened once more, but she spoke no words. "Ms. Langston," Matthew stated, pivoting with a return to decorum, "would you be willing to accompany me? I will personally oversee your transaction from my office." Nadira acknowledged with a single nod. "Certainly." They started to leave, passing the lines of desks and glass-walled offices. Cheryl stayed still by the front desk, her eyes wide, her face unreadable. No one moved towards her. The receptionist looked at her keyboard. The security guard walked away slowly, seeming unsure of what to do. Just as they were about to vanish down the hallway, Matthew halted and turned. Cheryl looked up, clearly surprised. "My office. After this meeting, we'll be discussing your role here in detail." He didn't raise his voice. Wasn't necessary. However, Cheryl already sensed a change in the atmosphere. Matthew's office presented a crisp, though understated, impression. It featured clean lines, 2 chairs positioned across from his desk, and a tall window allowing morning light to spread across the carpet. Nadira waited until he invited her to sit, and even then, she maintained a straight posture and a composed demeanor. He closed the door softly, then turned back to face her. "Ms. Langston, I want to apologize for what just happened. That should not have occurred. Not here. Not anywhere. You were treated unfairly," Nadira stated calmly, placing her folder on the desk. "However, this isn't the first time. It probably won't be the last," Matthew responded, leaning against the edge of his desk. "We have protocol for a reason, to prevent exactly this kind of thing from happening." Cheryl disregarded every step. "She didn't just disregard protocol," Nadira said. "She formed an opinion of me immediately upon seeing my face." Matthew breathed out his nose, crossing his arms. "I acknowledge that." He resumed looking at the documents she had placed before him, reviewing them without speaking. He wasn't hurried. He was carefully considering everything. "Everything is in the correct order," he stated. "I never questioned it. However, I do want to inquire. Did she allow you any opportunity to provide an explanation before summoning security?" "Not really," Nadira responded. "She recognized my name, saw my face, and heard my title, yet still inquired if the appointment belonged to another person." Matthew rubbed his jaw. "That will present a challenge for her. A significant one." Nadira inclined her head. "I didn't intend for anyone to lose their job. I am aware of that. However, sometimes repercussions are deserved." Immediately, his office phone vibrated. He answered, listened briefly, then instructed, "Send her in." A knock followed shortly, and Cheryl entered. The usual assuredness had vanished. Her face was pale, her shoulders slightly hunched. She walked as if unsure how to position her hands or where to look. "Ms. Langston," she began, her voice quiet. "I owe you an apology. I was mistaken. That wasn't my goal." "You don't have to pretend," Nadira stated, interrupting. Her voice wasn't harsh, only resolute. "You acted precisely as you did. You didn't believe I was who I claimed to be, and instead of verifying, you chose to embarrass me." Cheryl looked to Matthew, visibly wanting him to intervene. He remained silent. "I've spent over 2 decades in this field," she continued. "I've witnessed fraud, identity theft, all sorts of deception. And none of that pertains to me," Nadira stated. "You didn't err due to caution. You err because you believed you could evade detection," Matthew finally said. "Cheryl, following a review of events this morning, encompassing internal audit records and client appointment logs, I have decided to end your employment, effective immediately." Cheryl blinked. "And? Are you serious?" "Yes, I am," Matthew replied. "You breached client protocol, showed disrespect to one of our most valuable account holders, and created a public disturbance that jeopardized the bank's reputation. This wasn't an isolated mistake. It was a pattern, and it concludes here." She appeared ready to retaliate, but the atmosphere offered no space for her to exert herself. She faced Nadira. "I didn't intend to cause you any personal offense," she said. "You didn't offend me," Nadira replied softly. "You showed disrespect. There's a distinction." Cheryl lowered her gaze, then pivoted, exited the doorway, and left it slightly open. Matthew remained still for a moment. Subsequently, he settled into his desk chair and raised his head. I trust that achieves a degree of responsibility. This is a beginning, Nadira responded. However, beyond the confines of that office, the narrative was quickly moving away from the bank. Information doesn't spread rapidly within a bank, except when a significant event occurs. And what unfolded that morning at Sycamore was not merely significant, it was irrefutable. As Nadira and Matthew left the office, the ambience in the lobby had fundamentally changed. Patrons remained silent. Tellers murmured behind their workstations. Cheryl's absence was more pronounced than her presence had ever been. The nameplate had already been taken from the front glass office, as if she had never worked there. Matthew walked Nadira out personally. "I'll ensure the rest of the paperwork is managed by someone capable," he said. "You shouldn't have to experience this level of absurdity. Ever." Nadira nodded. Accepting the folder, he returned to her. "The paperwork is the straightforward part," she replied. He gave a quiet, respectful laugh. Indeed, they arrived at the front doors, where two customers graciously held them open. A teller rose from behind the counter and offered a small wave, hesitant yet genuine. The sun was ascending higher above Phoenix. The air was dry, and the pavement was warm. Nadira hesitated close to the curb, her driver advancing, the car door already ajar. She glanced back at Matthew. "A statement you made in your office resonated with me, that occasionally consequences are deserved." He affirmed this with a nod. "Yes, I agree," she stated. "But repercussions lacking comprehension do little to affect change." Matthew lifted his eyebrows, showing interest. "I don't want Cheryl to experience hardship," Nadira proceeded. "I need people to understand this wasn't about me. This occurs for Black professionals, particularly women, on a daily basis. It happens at airports, restaurants, stores, and meetings. And frequently, no one faces termination. They're simply disregarded." Again and again, he remained silent. He allowed her to continue. Perhaps for the first time, someone like him genuinely listened. "If the bank is to address this with seriousness," she stated, "refrain from simply publishing a statement online. Avoid issuing a standard apology. Initiate a dialogue. Instruct your managers regarding the oversights made. Prevent this from recurring for the next woman who enters that establishment." Matthew inhaled deeply, his posture now slightly more burdened. "You are correct. I am unable to reverse the events that transpired. However, I can ensure they contribute to a positive outcome." "That's the true measure, isn't it?" Nadira responded. "Not what one accomplishes with an audience, but what one alters when unobserved." She entered the vehicle, and the door closed behind her. The interior was quiet, but the silence felt clean. Her driver glanced back through the mirror. "Everything satisfactory, Ms. Langston?" She looked at her hands, then out the window at the glass facade of the bank. Cheryl had resolved to ignore her. The crucial decision, the one that would have significant impact, had already been made by someone else. "Yes, it has," she said softly. Nadira didn't know that within 24 hours the entire country would be discussing what transpired inside that branch. It began with a tweet, just a few lines from someone who had been sitting near the loan officer's desk that morning. "Just witnessed a Black woman CEO get denied service at her own bank." She remained composed, publicly addressed the bias, and the manager was terminated immediately. I don't know her name, but I won't forget her demeanor. By lunchtime, the tweet had surpassed 40,000 likes. By evening, it appeared on Instagram, then Facebook, and subsequently on local news. A local blogger identified Nadira's name by comparing information with a press release Bluestone Dynamics released earlier that month. A Phoenix reporter verified the information with the bank. By nightfall, Nadira Langston was trending across the nation. She made no public statements. It wasn't necessary. Others shared their experiences. LinkedIn was filled with accolades. Corporate professionals, frequently Black women, recounted similar situations, being questioned at the valet of their own office buildings, asked to show ID 3 times before boarding first-class flights, being addressed as sweetie, even while leading negotiations worth millions. People described Nadira as graceful, resilient, and composed. However, those who understood the situation better explained that it was more than grace. It was a matter of survival. Simultaneously, Sycamore First corporate headquarters mobilized. Within 24 hours, they issued a statement recognizing the incident, confirming Cheryl Bainbridge's departure from employment, and affirming the company's dedication to equity and continued training. This response proved insufficient for the public. Numerous comments appeared, questioning how many other Cheryls remain working in your branches. And do your executives grasp that implicit bias training cannot address issues permitted by your hiring processes? Black women should not be expected to remain composed when facing disrespect. Nadira made no public statements regarding the situation until 3 days later when she consented to an interview on a podcast hosted by a longtime friend and business strategist, Leona Bates. They faced each other in a silent studio in Tempe, with microphones activated and without any prepared notes. Leona began softly, asking, "You've remained silent while the internet has erupted. What prompted this response now?" Nadira answered, "Because the matter is no longer about me." Leona focused on what this situation highlighted. Specifically, that despite possessing the correct titles, documents, and credentials, people still perceive you as an outsider. Speaking out is then labeled as causing a disturbance, while remaining quiet is interpreted as agreement. It's a draining predicament, regardless of the choice. They discussed the matter for almost an hour, extending beyond the bank to address the significant emotional burden of maneuvering within established hierarchies while burdened by long-standing prejudices. Nadira remained composed. She didn't express sadness or frustration. Instead, she simply stated the facts, clearly, steadily, and without question. Following the broadcast, a fresh surge of interest emerged. This interest was authentic, thoughtful, and not superficial. Fellow CEOs contacted her. Business publications featured the narrative. A headline declared, "She didn't raise her voice. She raised the bar." Nevertheless, Nadira maintained a grounded perspective. She did not desire recognition. She sought transformation, and she understood that meaningful change rarely appears in news headlines. The bias appeared in hiring practices, policy decisions, and even in determining who was initially believed. Even after the initial news coverage faded and the events became part of collective memory, those who witnessed her that morning at the bank still remembered what they saw. A few weeks later, Nadira addressed a room full of college students at Arizona State University. She had not intended to give any public speeches that season, as her schedule was already very full. When a business ethics professor contacted her and requested a conversation with her class, she readily agreed. The event was understated. There were no stage lights or press coverage, just 40 students, some taking notes in notebooks, others using laptops, eager to hear from the woman whose experience transformed a regular bank visit into a nationwide conversation. She presented no slides. There was no podium. She simply walked to the room's front, paused, and began speaking. "I won't be telling a storybook narrative," she stated. "I won't be suggesting that if you labor diligently, no one will challenge you, because that isn't invariably accurate." The room fell silent, all attentive. You can possess the title, the suit, the contracts, the track record, and still be informed that you don't belong, not due to any failings on your part, but because someone else cannot envision your triumph without a face resembling their own. She surveyed the room. Her voice remained gentle, but each word resonated. And in those moments, a choice presents itself. Do you contract to ease their discomfort, or do you maintain your full presence, even if it creates tension in the space? A young man seated in the front row raised his hand. He asked, "How did you manage to remain composed during that experience? Weren't you feeling anger?" Nadira responded with a slow nod. "Naturally, I was. But anger is only valuable if you understand how to channel it. That day, I employed it to remain grounded. I employed that tactic to ensure she couldn't dismiss me without looking me in the eye while doing it." Another hand then rose, this time from a young woman. "What advice would you offer someone just beginning, who hasn't developed a resume like yours?" Nadira hesitated. "Recognize your value before anyone else attempts to define it for you. And if they try to diminish you, speak regardless, even if your voice trembles." There is a certain quality to her delivery, as if she were addressing herself as much as the listener. Following the presentation, students formed a line to express their gratitude. Some simply desired to shake her hand. Others sought guidance. One young woman, speaking softly, shared, "I'm studying engineering. I'm considering dropping out. I didn't believe there was a place for someone with my background." Nadira responded, making direct eye contact, "There is. And if there isn't, create it." That evening, back in her office, Nadira found herself alone at her desk, enjoying a cup of tea. Her inbox remained full. Her phone continued to buzz. The excitement hadn't fully subsided. She understood that the public's attention would fade. However, certain individuals would retain the memory. The students, the customers present in that bank lobby, the employees who witnessed a manager lose her position due to someone's unwillingness to yield. And perhaps, in the future, when a woman like her entered a place where she wasn't anticipated, she might be greeted instead of questioned. She might be respected, all because of one moment, one voice, one refusal to remain silent. If this story resonated with you, even slightly, please share it. Change doesn't always begin with prominent demonstrations or widespread media attention. Occasionally, it originates with a composed, persistent voice that states, "This isn't right."